Hello and welcome to Cloning and Building Our Code. It's Sam here, not Ben for a change. Just going to be telling you a few things about Git again. So we're kind of doing a little bit of a circle round after you've done a bit of a dive into the editor with Ben in the last lecture and actually started creating some C++. It's going to be quite useful for you to understand what's coming up in this lecture, namely cloning our project. And by that I mean cloning the project that Ben and I have been making through the section and hosting up on GitHub. Great place for comparison if you're ever getting stuck and things aren't working out like they were in the videos. Well, you can go ahead and clone our project and run it on your computer and see where it might be different, make some comparisons. We're also going to be looking at how we can check out a particular lecture's state, so you can get the project and you can turn it into the state it was at the end of a particular lecture, so you can really compare like for like. And I'm going to be telling you how Unreal's build system works. Now, this is going to be vital, and it's going to be clear in just a minute why you'll need to know this, but it's to do with being able to run code from older versions of Unreal. And we're going to be able to diagnose build system issues as well. So without further ado, let's dive right in. So I'm talking about how we can get hold of the changes for a particular lecture, a particular project, and a particular lecture that we have created as the instructors. So how are you going to do this? Well, you're going to use source tree. That's a little bit of a hint because that is something you've seen in previous lectures. And then we're going to go and find the project state for this lecture. Now, the easiest way to do this, there's a couple of ways, but the easiest way is from the video you're currently on, go to the resources available tab on Udemy and go and find the link called Lecture Project Changes. Now, every lecture has one of these. They're unique. They take you to a different place, each single link. And as you can see here, this is showing you all the changes that Ben made in this lecture. And you can see the addition down here of the position report.cpp class that he made in this lecture, or you made in the last lecture. So this is useful. It's a useful view for a start. But if we go and click Browse Files, you're going to see a file hierarchy, which is the state at the end of the lecture, not just the changes, but the actual state. And you can get hold of this on your own computer by going to this little green button called Clone or Download and copying this URL. You can either click it and copy it or use the little copy button there. And then go over into Source Tree. And you're going to find a button called Clone. It might be in a slightly different place on the Mac. On Windows, it's here in the toolbar. I'm going to click that, and you're going to paste that URL into the parameter called the source path. This is where you're cloning from. You're going to clone to a directory on your disk. So we're going to go to Browse. We're going to create ourselves a new directory. Not like that. Go and create a new folder, and I'm going to call it Building Escape Clone, like so. You can call it whatever you like. You could call it Building Escape Instructor version or something like that. Just make sure you differentiate this project from the one that you've been building along with the lectures. And then you can select that folder and you can go ahead and hit clone. And that's going to go up to GitHub, pull the project state all the way down. And the project state isn't just going to be the version at the end of the series. It's actually going to have all of the Git history. So it's going to have all the different commits and all the different states it was in during the different lectures. Now, when that's done cloning, it might take a little while to do that, but when it's done, you will see a view that looks a little bit like this. Now, this is the full history of this project, and you can see that some of these are lectures, some of them are not lectures, such as update to license, update to README, and at the end here there's an upgrade build configuration. We're going to talk about that in a little minute, but the point here is that mostly they correspond one for one with your lectures, and it's basically Ben has committed every time he has finished a lecture, and you can see the state. So one very useful thing is to be able to go and check out the state at a particular time. Go and check out the state, for example, at the lecture we were just on. Last lecture was, let's go and have a look, scrolling back, Unreal's class system. Now we can check it out very simply. You could either double click or you could right click and hit checkout, which is going to check out the state of, at the end of that lecture, into your directory so that you can build it and run it in the Unreal Editor. Now you'll notice source tree is giving me a warning here, something about a detached head and no longer on a branch. Now you don't have to worry about that if you're not planning to make any commits from that point onwards. If you understand about branches, then you will understand that this error message here, or warning message. So we're just going to go ahead and click OK. So it's just going to go and check us out, and we know that we're checked out at this commit because there's this little head label next to the commit. Now I want to show you a common problem that you're going to get when checking out an older commit with a newer editor version. I have the editor version 4.18, which is newer than what Ben was using when he recorded these lectures, and this lecture has been recorded later, in fact. So we're going to see what kind of problems that throws up. Now I'm going to go and open up the Windows Explorer at this project's directory. I can do this quickly in SourceTree by hitting the Explorer button on the shortcut menu here. For some reason it's got me in some subfolder, but if I go up a little bit to the Building Escape Clone root folder, you can see this is exactly the state that Ben had. Now I'm going to go to Building Escape folder, which is where our project lives, and I'm going to try and open up the U project, which is just a very reasonable thing that you might want to do. Now you can see it's asking me to select an editor version because I don't have the version of the editor that Ben was using. It's going to ask me between the editor versions that I have, which one would I like to try and run it with. So I can go ahead and click OK. That will actually have updated some config in the repo telling it which editor version to use. And now you can see this error showing up here, which says failed to generate project files. Now you might be scratching your head at this point going, Sam, why have you led us down this blind alley? Well, let me show you. But first of all, we need to understand Unreal's build system just a little bit. How do we get from writing code to having something that runs in an editor or that runs in a game? Let's have a look. So the key thing that we want to get to is a binary. Now a binary is what runs in the editor, it's what runs in a game. It's a thing that is machine code that runs on your computer, and you've probably come across the idea of machine code and compilation before, but if you haven't, it's what the computer understands, and we need to translate to that from a language that we understand like C++, or a language that we are learning to understand anyway. So how do we translate to binaries? Well, we do a build, and what do we do a build from? We do a build from a particular kind of configuration, and this, or a project, which might be something like your Xcode project or your Visual Studio solution. So these files, .xcode project, .sln, Visual Studio solution, which define how to build these binaries. Now, we've got this in our repo, so what's going wrong? Why is that a problem? Why are we not able to build? We've got a Building Escape SLN. Well, because Unreal's build system goes one step further. Because you'll notice here that Xcode Proj and SLN are going to be different on Mac versus PC. What Unreal has done is they've created an independent build system to generate these files, and it's called the Unreal Build System. And so what we do is we have a step just before this which generates the project files, and it generates them from these files here, these target.cs and build.cs. Now, where do we find those files? Those files are in your source directory, and you can see there's this buildingescape.target.cs, buildingescape.editor.target.cs, and under the Building Escape folder, we've also got a buildingescape.build.cs. So these files belong to the Unreal build system. They're written in a language called C#, which is very similar to C++, and the Unreal build system uses these CS files to generate SLN files or Xcode Proj files, depending on which system you are on, if you're on a Mac or if you're on a PC, and then it can build from there. So that's the steps. It takes these target CS and build CS files, generates project files, goes to Xcode Project or Visual Studio Project, and then it can build it to binary. So where has it failed? Let's have a look at our error message again. Saying failed to generate project files. And actually, if you go and have a look at this, you can see that the errors are all in either a target CS or a build CS. And that should give us a clue of what we're doing wrong, basically, that we are not able to do this first part, this first step of generating the project files. And that's what we need to do. Now, there could be a different error if we failed to build at this stage, but I will show you how to deal with that later. For now, let's deal with this generating the project file issue. Now, why is this an issue? This is an issue because in 4.18, they've changed the specification of these project files a little bit. So Ben's old project files, these target.cs, no longer work. So we're going to have to update them. And that is where I'll draw your attention to that commit I pointed out just a little bit earlier, this upgrade build configuration to 4.18, because I've already noticed this and I've made a commit telling you basically exactly what steps you're going to have to do to update. And you can notice that there are a few files, if you click on that commit, there are a few files in that commit that have been changed. And one of them is the U project, you don't have to worry about that. But the building escape.target.cs, the building escape editor.target.cs, and the building escape.build.cs have all been changed. Now, I'd like to challenge you to go ahead and find these files for yourself. So let me just show you how. You go to source, go to one of these files, you right click it, hit edit it in whatever kind of notepad editor you want to. And what I want you to do is go and have a look at the changes that I've made. You can see them in source tree. You can see red is where a line has been taken away, green is where a line has been added, or you can kind of see that it's basically I've changed the end of this line to have this base target. So what I want you to do is go ahead and try and get the files looking the same as they do in this commit, the same changes being applied, and see if you can get it to generate the project files. Okay, so let me just recap the challenge. You're going to open up those .cs files in a text editor, apply the changes from the commit that I indicated, and try and get it to build. Okay, pause the video and have a go at this challenge. Okay, welcome back. So let's try and apply these changes. So the first file that I'm going to deal with is this building escape target.cs. I'm going to right click it, hit edit. Here we go. I think I already had it open, so I'm going to close one of those down and not save. Okay, so let's see. So I've got this building target.cs, and what is being changed? So you'll notice this line that has this public building escape target that looks like a method definition in C++. It's very similar in C#. And it has this weird, funky thing. So I've removed that line and I've added one that has a colon base target at the end. So I'm going to put that on as well, without trying to edit too many things. So base target, like so. What else has changed? I deleted this whole thing, this whole method that deals with setup binaries. So I can go ahead and do the same in this file, and that's the only thing I've changed. So I can go ahead and save it and close it. Okay, what's with the next file? The editor target.cs. Oops, I'm opening it in Visual Studio. That's okay too. You can open it in Visual Studio. So let's have a go at doing it with Visual Studio. The same thing. Going to go back into source tree, find the editor target.cs, see what we changed. Again, this addition of base target. So let's try and add that in. Colon base target. Try and keep things like white space the same as well, just in case. And there you can see what have I done. I've deleted this setup binaries again. And if you pay close attention to which lines are being deleted and which ones are not, it'll say that I deleted the comments as well. And in actual fact, this extra modules add building escape goes inside these brackets here. So do pay attention to which brackets things go inside. And you can see that we've got this extra modules. In fact, you can copy and paste out of source tree, extra modules, add building escape. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and save that. And finally, I'm going to go into the building escape folder and open building escape build.cs. I'm going to make sure that opens in Visual Studio 2017, which I've got here. And I'm going to see what I changed about the build CS. Okay, this line has been changed quite significantly, so I'm going to copy it, Control-C it, in source tree, and I'm going to change the whole line like so to, it has this read-only targets and base targets thing going on. And what else has changed? Oh, doesn't look like much. Looks like I changed a little bit of white space. So that seems to have been the main change in this file. So I'm going to go ahead and make sure that is saved too and close Visual Studio down for the next bit, which is going to be going to the building escape folder and trying to open our project again. So I'm going to close down the error message and open up the U project again, and hopefully it'll try and rebuild and it will try and generate. So it's saying rebuild them now, which is a good sign. I don't think we got to that stage before. Starting build, and we'll just let that run and see whether it succeeds. Okay, so it looks like the build succeeded, which means that our applying of the changes from that commit worked and it was a challenge successfully achieved. But I want to show you what would happen if, for example, we had a failure a little bit later in the build system. So we had this failure in generating project files. What happens if the failure had been in the build and we hadn't got any binaries? So for this, I'm going to have to wait for the Building Escape editor to launch and then close it down again. So there we go. I'm just going to close it. And then I am going to go ahead and delete the binaries folder that we have just created with the successful build. And I'm going to introduce an error in the source code just to show you if there was something wrong with that build stage, how it's going to fail. So I'm going to go into my sources. I'm going to go to the Building Escape and open up our position report CPP in Notepad. And I'm just going to make a trivial change. I'm going to remove a semicolon, which by now you probably know is something that C++ doesn't really like. So then I'm going to go up to the Building Escape and I'm going to try and launch the U project. And it's going to go and ask me to build it again. So I'm going to go ahead and rebuild it. And we'll see what kind of error message comes up from that. Okay, here it is. Building Escape could not be compiled. Try rebuilding from source manually. Now, if you see this error at any point, don't be afraid. All this means is it failed to build normally, like it would if you have any code errors, but that you didn't have a binaries folder in the first place, so it couldn't open up the editor. So what do you do in this situation? Very, very simple. You right-click on the U project, and you can do it the same in Mac. It's in the Services menu instead, but you can find the Generate Visual Studio Project files. Go ahead and do that because we know that the first step of the process is now working. We can generate those Visual Studio Project files, and then you can open up your solution, your Visual Studio solution, your Xcode solution, find the code error, and rebuild from there. So I'm not going to bore you with that. You know how to find code errors and such forth and how to build from within Visual Studio, but that's one way of getting around the error that we just saw. Fantastic. You now know how to clone, you know how to check out and compare your code, and also how to deal with version changes in that code. And I'll see you in later lectures.